The briefing room at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado fell silent when she walked in. Lieutenant Kira Volkov didn't acknowledge the stares. She'd learned years ago that silence was sharper than any comeback. The instructors exchanged glances. Someone in the back row whispered something that ended with laughter. She dropped her folder on the desk at the front, the sound echoing like a judge's gavel. What none of them knew yet was that the woman standing before them had already done something no one in that room would ever accomplish. But that revelation would come later, in a way that would make some of them question everything they thought they knew about strength. 6 weeks earlier, Kira had been flying reconnaissance missions over the Persian Gulf. Fighter pilot, naval aviator, 10 years of service, 3 deployments, more flight hours than most pilots accumulated in 15. But there was something else on her record, something buried so deep that even her commanding officer didn't have full access to the file. A joint operation. Afghanistan, 2019. Details redacted. Outcome classified. The only thing visible in her jacket was a single line. Performed beyond scope of duties under extreme duress. What it didn't say was that she'd spent 48 hours on the ground with a team that wasn't supposed to exist, doing things that aviators weren't supposed to do. The invitation to SEAL training hadn't come through normal channels. It came from someone who'd been there. Someone who remembered what she'd done when the helicopter went down and the extraction became a firefight. The Navy was testing something new, cross-qualification for elite aviators with ground combat experience. The theory was elegant. The execution would be brutal. And Kira was the first woman they'd asked. Not because of politics, not because of quotas. Because when the shooting started and the radios went dead and the night turned into mathematics of survival, she'd been the one who kept 3 SEALs alive long enough for rescue. But none of the men in this briefing room knew that. They saw what they always saw, a woman trying to enter their world. The lead instructor, Master Chief Brennan Hawks, was a legend, 24 years in naval special warfare, face like weathered granite, voice like crushing depth. He looked at her the way a cliff looks at the ocean, aware, unmoved, waiting. "Lieutenant Volkov," he said, his tone carefully neutral. She met his eyes. "Master Chief." He glanced at his roster, then back at her. "You understand what you're volunteering for?" It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "Yes, Master Chief." Someone in the third row muttered something. She didn't turn. Hawks didn't react. But something in the room shifted like a scale beginning its slow tip toward a balance that no one had calculated correctly. The comment that broke through came from a Marine captain in the second row, a liaison officer named Garrett who'd been assigned to evaluate the cross-training program. His voice carried that particular brand of condescension that came from men who'd never been tested by anything they couldn't intimidate. "Try not to cry, sweetie," he said, loud enough, clear enough. The room didn't laugh, but it didn't correct him either. Kira's expression didn't change. She'd heard worse, done worse, survived worse. But she filed his face in the same mental folder where she kept every debt that would eventually come due. Master Chief Hawks set his clipboard down with deliberate precision. "Captain Garrett," he said quietly, "you'll observe protocol in my briefing room, or you'll observe from outside it." The Marine's smirk faded slightly, but not completely. The first phase of training was designed to break people. Not physically, though that would come. Psychologically. SEAL training didn't just test your body's limits, it measured what happened when your mind started negotiating with your will to quit. The cold, the sand, the constant harassment, the instructors weren't trying to make you fail. They were trying to show you what failure felt like so you'd recognize it and push past it. For most candidates, Hell Week was the crucible, 5.5 days. 4 hours of sleep total, continuous physical training in near-freezing water, most quit before Wednesday. Kira had done her research, she knew the statistics. She knew that the women who'd tried before her had faced something the men didn't, the weight of representation. When a man quit, he was just one person. When a woman quit, she became data, evidence, proof. She wouldn't quit, not because she had something to prove, because she'd already survived worse and none of these instructors had been there to see it. The first 2 weeks were preliminary, physical screening, paperwork, medical evaluations that prodded and measured and assessed every system. She passed everything. The numbers didn't lie. Cardiovascular capacity, upper body strength ratios, recovery metrics, all above the requirements, but numbers were just numbers. The real test was what happened when the numbers stopped mattering. When your body was screaming and your mind was listing every rational reason to stop, and the only thing keeping you going was something that couldn't be measured on any chart. They started the runs at dawn, 4 miles, 6 miles, 8. Full gear, boots chewing up sand that never seemed to get firmer. Kira kept pace with the middle of the pack, not leading, not struggling, tactical invisibility. She'd learned that in flight school. Never be the slowest, never be the loudest, be competent, be consistent, and let the doubters exhaust themselves looking for your weakness. The instructors noticed, Hawks particularly. He watched her with the same clinical attention he gave to everything, not hostile, not supportive, evaluating. After the third day of runs, he pulled her aside. They stood in the shade of a training building while the rest of the class recovered. "You're holding back," he said. No accusation, just observation. She met his gaze. "No, Master Chief," he waited. She knew what he was really asking. "I'm packing," she said. "Long game." Something shifted in his expression, not quite approval, recognition. He nodded once. "Smart, but when Hell Week starts there is no long game, just the next minute." She understood. "Yes, Master Chief." He studied her for another moment, then turned and walked away. She watched him go, then looked out at the obstacle course beyond. The wooden towers, the rope nets. The walls that seemed designed more for humiliation than training. She'd climbed worse. Flown missions where the turbulence nearly tore the aircraft apart. Landed on carriers at night with waves that swallowed flight decks. This was just different pain. The Marines arrived on Friday. 6 of them assigned to participate in a joint training evolution. Cross-service coordination, the official line read. But everyone knew what it really was, an experiment. Could Special Operations Forces integrate seamlessly across branches? Could a Navy SEAL work with Force Recon Marines, with Army Special Forces, with Air Force Pararescue, without the tribal loyalties destroying effectiveness? Captain Garrett was among them. He saw Kira during formation and his smirk returned. She ignored it. The evolution was scheduled for week 4 after initial screening but before Hell Week. A field exercise, 12 hours, desert environment, simulated hostile territory, teams of 8, mixed Navy and Marine personnel with Kira assigned to Garrett's squad. The brief came Sunday evening. Hawk stood before assembled candidates and support personnel, a topographical map glowing on the screen behind him. "Mission parameters are simple," he said. "Navigate 30 miles of desert terrain. Reach the extraction point. Avoid hunter teams. You'll carry 40-pound packs. No resupply. No vehicles. Navigation tools only, map, compass, and your brain." He paused, scanning faces. "The Marines will be running the same course, same rules, separate route." The implication was clear. Competition. Kira saw Garrett's team exchange glances. Confidence. She knew that look. She'd seen it on enemy pilots' faces right before they realized they'd misjudged the intercept angle. The terrain was unforgiving. Nevada desert, late autumn, cold at night, scorching by afternoon. They moved out at dawn, Kira positioned third in the 8-person column. Garrett took point, his map case swinging from his shoulder webbing. The pace was aggressive, too aggressive. Kira felt it immediately, the way she felt bad weather forming on a horizon. They were burning energy too fast. The first checkpoint came at mile 7. They reached it 15 minutes ahead of schedule. Garrett looked back at his team with satisfaction. "Good pace," he announced. "Let's maintain it." Kira said nothing. 2 Marines nodded agreement. The Navy candidates looked tired but determined. They pushed on. By mile 12, 2 men were struggling. A SEAL candidate named Morrison and a Marine corporal named Diaz. Both were solid operators. Both were paying for the aggressive pace. Garrett called a 5-minute halt. Everyone dropped packs and drank water. Kira studied the map. They were deviating from the optimal route, not dangerously, just inefficiently. Adding maybe 2 miles to the total movement, she approached Garrett. "We're drifting west," she said, keeping her voice neutral. He glanced at her. "I know where we are, Lieutenant." She pointed to the map. "There's a wash system about a kilometer north, flatter ground, faster movement." He looked at where she was indicating, then back at her. "Thanks for the input." Translation: he wasn't interested. They continued west. The terrain got rougher, more elevation change, more loose rock that turned every step into a negotiation. Morrison went down at mile 16, rolled his ankle in a crevice hidden by shadow. He tried to walk it off, couldn't. Garrett called another halt. Frustration was written in every line of his body language. "Can you continue?" he asked Morrison. The SEAL candidate looked at his ankle, already swelling. "I can make it." But he couldn't, not at the pace Garrett wanted. Kira watched the situation develop like a tactical problem. They had options: slow the pace, send someone ahead to call for early extraction, or redistribute Morrison's gear and keep moving hard. Garrett chose the third option. "Divide his pack weight," he ordered. Everyone took extra, including Kira. The sun was directly overhead when they hit mile 20. Heat radiated off the rocks in visible waves. 2 more men were struggling now. The extra pack weight combined with dehydration and the pace was breaking people. Kira's shoulders ached. Her boots had rubbed blisters through her socks and her water was getting low. But she'd felt worse. Been worse. On that hillside in Afghanistan, she'd carried a wounded operator 300 meters with her back on fire from shrapnel. This was just discomfort. Garrett's navigation was getting sloppier. He'd missed the last checkpoint completely, realized it 20 minutes later, and they'd had to backtrack. Time lost, energy wasted, morale cracking. At mile 23, it all fell apart. They crested a ridge and saw it, a box canyon, cliffs on 3 sides. The map showed a pass, but the reality was different. Rockslide, recent, blocking the route. Garrett stared at it, then at his map, then at the canyon. Kira moved beside him. "We're here," she said, pointing to the map. "The slide wasn't on the survey. We need to backtrack 2 miles and take the northern route." He didn't respond for a moment, then, "We can climb it." She looked at the rock slide. Unstable, steep, with the pack weight and Morrison's injury extremely risky. "That's not advisable," she said carefully. "I didn't ask for your advice, Lieutenant." His voice had an edge now. Pride wounded, judgment compromised. She could have pushed, could have pulled rank. They were the same grade, but she had seniority by date. Instead, she stepped back. "Understood." She watched him rally the team, watched them approach the slide, watched the first Marine start climbing, rocks shifting under his boots. They made it 20 feet before a section gave way. The Marina sergeant named Kyle slid down in a cascade of loose stone. He wasn't hurt, but the message was clear. The route was impassable. Garrett stood at the base of the slide, his face a mask of frustration. The team waited. The sun beat down. Minutes ticked past. Kira walked to where Morrison sat, his ankle propped on his pack. "How you holding up?" she asked quietly. He grimaced. "Been better, ma'am." She looked at the canyon walls, calculating, then back at the map. The northern route added 3 miles. With Morrison's condition and the team's exhaustion, they'd be lucky to finish before dark. And night in the desert could be genuinely dangerous. Cold, disorienting, easy to get lost. She made a decision, walked back to Garrett. "Request permission to speak freely." He looked at her, anger and exhaustion warring in his expression. "What?" Not a question. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. Take the northern route, adjust the pace, get everyone home safe." His jaw tightened. "You questioning my leadership?" "I'm offering a solution to a tactical problem." They stood there, 2 officers in the middle of nowhere, team watching. This was the moment, the fulcrum. Garrett could accept input, could adjust, could recognize that leadership sometimes meant admitting when the situation had changed, or he could dig in, prove he couldn't be swayed. He chose the latter. "We're doing it my way." Kira nodded slowly. "Roger that." She walked back to her position in the line. They backtracked, not north, south. Garrett's new plan. Another route he'd spotted on the map. It looked shorter. It wasn't. By mile 26, everyone was running on fumes. Morrison was in serious pain. 2 others were showing signs of heat exhaustion. Kira had stopped sweating, which was a bad sign. Dehydration advancing. The hunter team found them at mile 27. 4 instructors in a jeep playing the role of enemy forces. In the exercise scenario, getting spotted meant mission failure, but it also meant the suffering could end. The Jeep rolled up alongside the struggling column. Master Chief Hawks was driving. He stopped, looked at the team, looked at Garrett. Status, Garrett tried to stand straighter. We're on course, Master Chief, continuing to objective. Hawks' expression didn't change. That's so. He stepped out of the Jeep, walked to Morrison, examined his ankle. Then he surveyed the rest of the team, calculating. When his gaze landed on Kira, he held it for a moment. Lieutenant Volkov. She stepped forward. Master Chief. Where are you? She didn't need to check the map. Grid 794238, approximately 3 miles from extraction point. Fastest route, she pointed northeast. Through the wash system, flat terrain, 90 minutes at moderate pace. Hawks looked at Garrett. That match your assessment, Captain. Garrett's face was flushed, not from heat. We're taking a different route. Hawks was silent for a long moment, then he nodded. You're the team leader, your call. He walked back to the Jeep. Before getting in, he looked at Kira again, still evaluating. The Jeep drove off, leaving them in dust and silence. The team continued. Garrett's route. Through rougher terrain, adding time, adding pain, Kira kept moving, one step, another. The rhythm of it almost meditative. She'd been here before, not this exact place, but this exact state, body protesting, mind offering exits, will pushing forward. They reached extraction at sunset. Last team to arrive. The Marines had finished 2 hours earlier. Other Navy teams were already cleaned up, eating, recovering. Garrett's team stumbled in like survivors of a disaster. Morrison could barely walk. 2 others needed medical attention for dehydration. Hawks was waiting. He watched them arrive, watched them collapse, watched Garrett file his report. Then he called Kira over. They stood apart from the others. The desert cooling rapidly, stars beginning to emerge. Tell me what happened, he said. She gave him the tactical summary. No blame, no emotion, just facts, route choices, pace decisions, team status. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he nodded. Could you have led that team better? She considered the question. Yes, Master Chief. Why didn't you? Because it wasn't her team. Because Garrett was the designated leader. Because sometimes the lesson had to be experienced, not explained. Chain of command, Master Chief. He studied her. Chain of command can be flexible in small unit operations, especially when safety is at risk. She understood what he was really asking. Would she speak up when it mattered? Would she challenge authority when lives were on the line? If it had gotten critical, she said carefully, I would have intervened. He seemed satisfied with that. Good. He turned to leave, then paused. Garrett filed a complaint about you, said you were insubordinate. She wasn't surprised. I gave him tactical advice. He declined it. That's his prerogative. Hawks nodded. That's what I told him. He walked away. Hell Week started on Sunday night. They stood on the beach at 2300 hours, 60 candidates in formation, surf pounding behind them. The instructors circled like sharks. This was it, the event that would define everything. 5.5 days of orchestrated suffering designed to find your breaking point and then push past it. Kira had slept well the night before, eaten properly, hydrated. All the physical preparation she could do was done. Now it was mental. Hawks addressed them from the front. Gentlemen and Lieutenant, that got a few chuckles. For the next 132 hours you will be cold, wet, sandy, and tired. You will wonder why you volunteered. You will want to quit, most of you will. He paused, letting that sink in. The bell is over there. He pointed to a brass bell mounted on a post. Ring it 3 times, your suffering ends. No shame, no judgment, just done. The bell gleamed in the floodlights. Kira looked at it once, then away. She'd made her decision long before arriving. The bell didn't exist for her, not an option, not a possibility. The first evolution was surf torture. They locked arms in teams of 6, sitting in the surf zone. Waves crashed over them. Cold Pacific water, 58 degrees. They'd sit there for an hour, maybe more. The cold was immediate, shocking. It drove the breath from your lungs and made your muscles clench. Within minutes, shivering started. Within 10 minutes, it became violent. Kira locked her jaw to keep her teeth from chattering, focused on breathing, focused on the horizon. Someone in another team started singing. Off-key, defiant. Others joined in. The instructors walked between teams, offering commentary. You can quit right now, hot coffee, warm shower, this all goes away. Their voices were almost kind, that made it worse. Kindness when you were suffering was a crack for weakness to seep through. Kira kept her eyes forward. The woman to her right, a SEAL candidate named Tors, was shaking badly. "You good?" Kira asked quietly. Tors nodded, couldn't speak, just nodded. After an hour, they were pulled from the surf, immediately sent to run. 4 miles, full gear. The running generated heat, almost made the cold worth it, almost. But then they'd stop and the cold would come back deeper now, sunk into bones. The cycle repeated. Surf, run, surf, repeat, all night. By dawn, 8 people had quit. The bell rang with mechanical precision. 3 chimes, another candidate walking away. The instructors didn't comment, just checked names off rosters. Monday brought new evolutions, obstacle course, boat drills, more running. The lack of sleep started showing. People stumbled, fell, got up slowly. Kira felt the fog setting in, that cottony feeling in her brain where thoughts became slow and simple. One task, then the next, then the next. No grand strategy. Just survive the current moment. The boat drills were particularly brutal. Teams of 6 carried inflatable boats, rubber ducks they were called, over their heads, while running, while doing exercises, while instructors yelled instructions. The boats weighed maybe 200 pounds, became heavier with every minute. Her team was mixed. 4 men, 2 women including her. They worked well together. No drama, no heroes, just grinding through, but other teams were fracturing, arguments, resentment, blame. The stress was finding every weakness in team dynamics and exploiting it. By Monday night, the count was down to 47. Tuesday was worse, much worse. The instructors introduced steel piers, cold steel structures extending into the ocean. They'd take teams out to the end, make them lie down on the steel. Let the wind and spray and cold metal leach every calorie from their bodies. This was where people truly broke, where hypothermia became a real risk, where your body started shutting down non-essential functions. Kira lay on that pier for what felt like hours. Actually was 90 minutes. She couldn't feel her fingers, couldn't feel her toes. Her mind drifted. She was back in the FA-18. Back in the air where cold was clean and pure and the world made sense. She could see the carrier deck below, perfect landing, catch the 3-wire, smooth. Then the instructor was shouting. "On your feet, move." She moved, didn't remember standing, didn't remember running. But suddenly she was running, her team beside her, and the pier was behind them. Wednesday morning. The count was 33. Kira's body was a collection of pains, chafed skin, bruised muscles, a headache that pulsed behind her eyes, but she was still there, still moving, still choosing every minute to not quit. The instructors noticed, not with praise, with increased attention. Tors had dropped during the night, rang the bell at 0300. Kira had watched her go, felt nothing, too tired for emotion. Wednesday afternoon brought rock portage. They'd take the boats into the surf, through the breaking waves, land on rocky beach, pull the boats out, do it again. The risk of injury was significant. Waves slammed boats into rocks, bodies into boats. It was chaos. Controlled chaos overseen by safety personnel, but chaos nonetheless. Kira's boat took a wave wrong, flipped. She went under, surfaced, grabbed the boat, held on. Her team rallied, righted it, pushed through. She'd swallowed water. Scraped her arm on something, didn't matter, they made it through. That night the count dropped to 28. Thursday was a blur. Kira remembered evolutions but not their order. Running, obstacle course, pool work, underwater knot tying while instructors tried to drown you. Not really, but it felt like it. She failed the knot twice, got it on the 3rd try. Thursday night, they were allowed to sleep. Not much, 4 hours, but after 4 days of virtually nothing it felt miraculous. Kira lay in her bunk, wanted to close her eyes, wanted to surrender to sleep. But her mind was racing, adrenaline or exhaustion or some combination. She thought about Afghanistan, about the helicopter, about the weight of a wounded operator and the sound of gunfire. This was hard, that had been harder. She slept. Friday, the last full day. The count was 25. Kira's team was intact, all 6 still there. They moved like zombies, responded to commands, executed tasks, but the spark was dimming. Everyone could see the finish line now. Saturday morning, just a few more hours. The temptation to coast was enormous, but the instructors knew that. Friday brought the hardest evolutions yet. They ran 10 miles with boats, then did an hour of surf torture, then ran again. The cruelty was intentional. When you could see the end, when you thought you'd made it, they showed you that nothing was guaranteed. People quit on Friday even after coming this far. The bell rang 4 times that day. Saturday morning came like a dream. 0600, they formed up on the beach. 21 candidates remained. Hawks stood before them. "Secure from Hell Week," he said simply. No ceremony. No celebration, just a statement of fact. They'd done it. Kira stood swaying slightly. Her body numb, her mind empty. She'd passed. She was still here, but she felt nothing. Too exhausted for relief. They were given 48 hours to recover, sleep, food, medical checks. Kira slept for 16 hours straight. When she woke, the pain hit every muscle, every joint. She could barely move, but she was alive. She'd survived. The next phase of training was different, skills-based. Combat diving, weapons, tactics. The suffering continued but became more purposeful. This wasn't about breaking people. It was about building them into something specific. Kira excelled at weapons work. Her marksmanship scores were exceptional. Combat diving was harder. The pool evolutions, the underwater navigation. But she adapted, learned, pushed through. The class continued to shrink. Injuries, performance failures, the attrition was steady. By week 12, they were down to 17. Captain Garrett appeared again in week 15. Joint training evolution, small unit tactics, urban environment, live fire exercises with simunitions, paint rounds that hurt but didn't kill. His team of Marines would play opposition force against the SEAL candidates. The scenario was compound clearance, hostage rescue. The SEAL candidates would assault. The Marines would defend. Kira was assigned team leader for her squad of 5. This was her chance. Show what she could do with authority, with trust, with a team that would follow her calls. She briefed her squad carefully. Entry points, assignments, backup plans. They moved out at dawn. The compound was a training facility designed to replicate Middle Eastern architecture. Narrow streets, multiple buildings. Plenty of ambush points. Kira took it slow, methodical, no rushing, no assumptions. They cleared the first building systematically. Room by room, communication tight, professional, found nothing. Moved to the second building, that's where the Marines were waiting. Garrett's team had set up a beautiful ambush. Caught Kira's point man in a fatal funnel. Paint rounds stitched across his vest. He was out. Kira called a halt, assessed. The building had 2 entrances. Garrett had covered the obvious one, so she'd use the obvious one as a diversion. She split her team. 2 would make noise at the front. She'd take 2 more through a window breach on the side. Risky, but speed and surprise would offset the risk. They moved into position. On her signal, the diversion team made entry. Gunfire erupted. While the Marines' attention focused forward, Kira's element came through the window. She moved fast, cleared left. Her teammate cleared right. They flowed through the building like water, found the first Marine. Kira's shots hit center mass. He was out. They pushed deeper, found Garrett in what he designated the strong point, a room with 1 entrance, good fields of fire. He had 2 Marines with him. Kira held at the doorway. "You're pinned, Lieutenant," Garrett called out. Nowhere to go. She didn't respond. Instead, she signaled her teammate. Flash bang, they'd pull it, count 3, entry. The simulated grenade went in, loud, disorienting. Kira followed immediately. Garrett was turning, reacting, but she was already on him. 2 shots, his vest marked. He was out. His Marines fired, caught her teammate. But Kira's last team member came through the second entrance. They'd breached a window while Garrett was distracted. It was over in seconds. The SEAL candidates had won. After-action review was held in the debriefing room. Instructors present, both teams. Hawks led the discussion, professional, analytical, what worked, what didn't. When it came time for Garrett to speak, his professionalism slipped. "Lucky," he said, looking at Kira. "You got lucky." Met his eyes, didn't rise to it. Lucky is what you call good planning when you didn't think of it. The room went quiet. Hawk's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Garrett stood. "You think you're hot shit because you passed Hell Week, because you can shoot straight." His voice was rising. "You're still," Hawks cut him off. "Captain Garrett, step outside." It wasn't a request. Garrett looked like he wanted to argue, but he left. Hawks turned to Kira. "Lieutenant, anything to add?" She thought about it, about all the things she could say, about Afghanistan, about the 48 hours she'd spent keeping Marines alive, about the fact that she'd earned her place here 10 times over, but she just shook her head. "No, Master Chief." Training continued. Week 18, Week 20. The skills accumulated. Kira became proficient in close-quarters battle, advanced demolitions, medical training that went far beyond basic combat life-saving. She learned to parachute, static line, and freefall. She learned small unit leadership in environments that ranged from Arctic to jungle. The class was down to 14. And then came the final exercise, the culmination, a week-long field problem that would test everything. Real-world scenario, simulated enemy force, objectives that changed dynamically. Teams would be assigned, mixed, not the same people they'd trained with for months. This was intentional. SEALs had to operate with whoever was available. Trust had to be instant, professional, based on competence, not friendship. Kira's team assignment was posted on Friday. She read the roster, felt her stomach drop. Captain Garrett was on her team. The brief was Monday morning. Scenario: rescue captured personnel from hostile territory. Intelligence suggested the captives were being held in a compound approximately 40 kilometers from their insertion point. Opposition force would be played by Marine Force recon elements and SEAL instructor staff. Rules of engagement: simunitions for direct combat, but the exercise could go kinetic if anyone made dangerous mistakes. Medical staff would be on standby. The team was 8 people. Kira, Garrett, 4 SEAL candidates, and 2 Marine officers participating in cross-training. Kira was designated team leader. This surprised everyone, including her. Hawks made the announcement without fanfare, just a statement. When Garrett objected, Hawks shut him down. "You had your chance to lead, Captain. Didn't go well." Lieutenant Volkov's turn. The tension was immediate, but orders were orders. Kira took the team through planning. She kept it professional. No ego, no payback, just focused on the mission. Garrett participated, but his body language screamed resentment. They inserted via helicopter at dusk, remote desert location, similar terrain to the earlier navigation exercise, but this time with a tactical objective. They moved out. Kira set a sustainable pace. Navigation via night vision and GPS. First checkpoint was a hide site 10 clicks from the landing zone. They made it by midnight, set security, rested for 2 hours. At 0200 they moved again. The intelligence packet suggested enemy patrols. Kira took them on routes that avoided likely patrol paths, slower, safer. They saw no one. By dawn they were in position overlooking the target compound. She split the team. 4 for the assault element, 4 for Overwatch. Garrett was assigned to Overwatch. He didn't like it. "I should be on the assault," he said. Kira kept her voice level. "I need experienced people in both elements. You're Overwatch." His jaw tightened, but he moved into position. The assault went smoothly. They breached at 0600, found the hostages' instructors playing the role, extracted them. The enemy response came as they were exfiltrating. A squad-sized element, good positions. Kira's Overwatch element engaged. Suppressive fire. Gave the assault element time to break contact. They moved to the primary extraction point. It was compromised. Enemy had anticipated it. Kira called an audible, shifted to alternate site, 3 clicks north. Rougher terrain but uncompromised. They moved fast. Hostages in the middle, security front and rear. The enemy pursued. Garrett's element stayed back, provided covering fire. He was good. She had to admit that. Whatever his personal issues, he could shoot. They reached the alternate extraction, set security, called for pickup. The helicopter was 5 minutes out. That's when everything went wrong. The enemy had moved faster than anticipated, flanked them, came at the perimeter from 2 directions. Kira's security element engaged, heavy simunition fire, paint rounds snapping through the air. 2 of her people went down, marked out of the fight. She grabbed a radio. "Overwatch needs suppression northeast sector," Garrett's voice came back. "Can't see them, no angle." She looked at the terrain. He was right. His position couldn't cover that sector. She made a decision. "Overwatch, relocate 50 meters east. You'll have the angle." Silence on the radio, then. That'll expose us. She understood his concern, but they didn't have options. Do it now? Garrett's element moved. They took fire, relocating. One of his Marines got marked, but they made the position, opened fire on the flanking enemy. The suppression worked. Kira rallied her remaining people, pulled back to tighter perimeter. The helicopter came in hot. Fast rope deployment of extraction gear. They got the hostages loaded, got the remaining team loaded. Last out was Kira. She turned to cover the withdrawal, took 3 paint rounds across her chest. She was marked, out, but the mission succeeded. After-action review was immediate. Hawks walked through the entire operation. Timeline, decisions, outcomes. When he got to the moment where Garrett's element had relocated under fire, he paused, looked at Garrett. Why'd you move when you knew it would expose your element? Garrett glanced at Kira, then back at Hawks. Team leader's call. I followed orders. Hawks nodded, looked at Kira. Was it worth losing a man to gain that firing position? She'd thought about this. Yes, Master Chief. We were about to lose the hostages. Acceptable trade. Hawks was quiet for a moment. Acceptable trade, he repeated. Remember that phrase, because that's what this job is. Constant calculation of acceptable trades. The training culminated in graduation. 12 people from the original 60. Kira was one of them. The ceremony was small, professional, no fanfare. They received their tridents, the seal insignia, eagle, anchor, pistol, trident, each element representing something, together representing commitment to something larger. Hawks pinned Kira's trident personally, looked her in the eye. You earned this, he said quietly. She nodded, couldn't speak. After the ceremony, Garrett approached. They stood in the California sun, 2 officers who'd clashed repeatedly. He extended his hand. You're better than I gave you credit for, he said. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was something. She shook his hand. We both completed the training, that's what matters. He nodded, walked away. She watched him go, felt nothing like victory, just tired satisfaction. She'd done what she came to do. But the real test was still ahead, because the Navy had a specific plan for Lieutenant Kira Volkov. The cross-qualification wasn't just about SEALs learning to fly or pilots learning ground combat. It was about creating something new. Someone who could operate seamlessly in both domains, air and ground. Someone who could plan a mission from the cockpit and execute it on foot. The orders came 3 weeks later. Assignment to a joint task force. Classified operations. Middle East theater. She'd deploy in 2 months. Time enough to get affairs in order. Time enough to remember why she'd volunteered for this in the first place. One evening, she stood on the beach at Coronado, watching the sun set over the Pacific. Same beach where Hell Week had started. She thought about the bell, about all the people who'd rung it. She didn't judge them. Everyone had their limits, their reasons. But she also thought about the people who'd stayed, who'd pushed through. What made the difference? Stubbornness, stupidity, purpose. Maybe all 3. Her phone buzzed, message from Hawks, brief. Final eval scores posted, top of class. Well done. She looked at the message, then at the ocean, then back at the message, deleted it. The scores didn't matter anymore. What mattered was what came next. The deployment, the operations. The chance to prove that the training, the suffering, the months of pushing past limits, that it all meant something. She turned from the ocean, walked back toward base. Behind her, the waves continued their endless rhythm, unchanged, indifferent, the way nature always is to human ambition. But she'd learned something in those waves, in the cold, in the dark. She'd learned that comfort was a trap, that growth only happened at the edge of capability, that strength wasn't something you were born with. It was something you built, one terrible choice at a time. The deployment began in autumn. Kira flew into Kuwait with the task force, mixed unit, SEALs, Marine Raiders, Army Special Forces, Air Force combat controllers, and her, the only person who could legitimately claim qualification in both aviation and special operations. The commanding officer was a Navy captain named Sarah Vance. Hard, competent, no tolerance for politics or ego. She called Kira into her office the first day. They talked for an hour about capabilities, about the unique skill set Kira brought, about how they might employ her. I'm going to use you differently than anyone else, Vance said. You okay with that? Kira understood. She'd be the bridge, the liaison, the person who could talk to pilots and ground forces with equal credibility. Yes, ma'am, Vance nodded. Good, because we've got a problem that needs your specific skill set. The problem was complex. Enemy forces were using a network of caves in mountainous terrain, difficult to access, impossible to assault without knowing exact layouts. Air strikes were ineffective. The caves went too deep. They needed intelligence, detailed, precise, and they needed someone who could both gather it and plan the subsequent operation. Kira studied the problem for a week. Satellite imagery, SIGINT reports, human intelligence from local sources. The caves were extensive. Multiple entrances. Interior layout unknown. Traditional reconnaissance would be slow, dangerous. She proposed something different, aerial insertion. Small team, fast in. Gather intelligence, fast out. Use her aviation background to plan the insertion. Use her SEAL training to execute the reconnaissance. Vance listened, asked questions, then approved it. Kira had 2 weeks to plan. She selected her team carefully. 4 operators, all experienced, 2 SEALs, 1 Marine, 1 Air Force pararescue. They trained together, rappelling, close quarters movement, emergency extraction procedures. Kira flew some of the training profiles herself, got back in the cockpit of an FA-18, remembered how much she'd missed it, the speed, the precision, the clean mathematics of aviation, but she also recognized how much she'd gained, the ground perspective, the understanding that sometimes the best answer wasn't dropping ordnance from 30,000 feet. Sometimes you had to put boots on ground. Sometimes you had to make eye contact with the problem. The insertion night was clear, cold at altitude. They flew in a helicopter, Kira in the back with her team. Combat gear, night vision, rappelling harnesses. The pilot was someone she knew. Guy she'd flown with years ago. He gave her a nod through the crew compartment window. She nodded back. The helicopter came in low, fast, terrain masking to avoid radar. They reached the insertion point, hovering 30 feet above a ridgeline. The crew chief gave the signal, ropes deployed. Kira went first, fast rope down, felt the rope burn through gloves, hit ground, moved clear, her team followed, 4 more impacts. Then the helicopter was gone, darkness, silence, just the team and the mountain. They moved toward the cave entrance. Slow, methodical, security at every step. Reached the entrance at 0200. It was larger than the photos suggested. Dark mouth in the mountainside. No visible security, but that meant nothing. Could be sensors, cameras, ambush. Kira signaled, 2-man entry team. She took point. 1 SEAL named Ramirez backed her up. They entered. Night vision turned the darkness green. The cave descended steeply. Natural formation, rough walls. They moved 30 meters in. Found evidence of recent occupation. Tarps, food containers, ammunition crates. Then they heard voices. Deeper in the cave, Kira froze, hands signal, hold. They listened. 2 speakers, maybe 3, arguing about something. She couldn't make out the language clearly. Could be local Taliban, could be foreign fighters, didn't matter. They needed to know what was down there. She made a decision, withdrew to the entrance. Gathered the team, shared what they'd found. They had options: abort, extract, report what they had, or push deeper, get better intelligence, risk compromise. She looked at her team. I'm going deeper, alone. You 4 hold security here. Anything goes wrong, you call extraction and get out. Ramirez shook his head. We go together. She appreciated the sentiment, but this wasn't a negotiation. That's an order. She moved before anyone could argue further, back into the cave, alone now. The voices got louder as she descended. The cave opened into a larger chamber. She found a position, elevated, behind some rocks, could see without being seen. Counted 12 hostiles, armed, organized. This wasn't a random hideout. This was a staging area. She took photos, documented faces, weapons, radio equipment, intel gold mine. Then she noticed something else. A passage in the back, guarded, 2 sentries. Whatever was down there was important. She watched for 20 minutes, memorizing patterns, shift changes, procedures. Then she withdrew, back up the cave. Back to her team, they extracted, clean, no contact. The helicopter came in exactly on schedule. They were airborne 12 minutes after leaving the cave entrance. Back at base, Kira briefed Vance, shared everything. The chamber, the personnel, the guarded passage. Vance listened intently. You're sure about the numbers? Kira nodded. 12 in the main chamber, likely more deeper in the complex. Minimum 20, could be double that. Planning for the assault took 3 days. Kira led it. She knew the terrain, knew the layout. The assault force would be larger, 30 operators. They'd hit at dawn, fast, overwhelming force. Secure the entrance, clear the main chamber, then push into the deeper sections. The operation launched on a Wednesday. Kira flew in with the assault force. Different helicopter, same mountains, same cave. But this time they weren't sneaking. This time they came with violence. The assault was textbook, overwhelming force. Suppressed weapons. They took the entrance without firing a shot. Sentries neutralized, secured, then into the main chamber. The hostiles were waking up, reacting too late. The SEAL team flowed through like a wave, precision. No wasted movement, every target identified, engaged, neutralized. The chamber was secure in 90 seconds. 2 hostiles killed, 10 captured. Then they pushed into the guarded passage. Kira was in the stack. The passage led to another chamber, smaller. This one set up as a planning room, maps on the walls, documents, laptops, intelligence treasure, but it was also defended. 4 hostiles, alert, armed. The gunfight was close, confined space. Kira took a round on her plate carrier. Impact knocked her back, but the ceramic stopped it. She returned fire. Her target went down. The chamber was secure in seconds. The intelligence hall was massive. Plans for attacks, networks, funding sources. They documented everything. Then rigged demolitions. The caves would be denied to the enemy. Permanently, extraction was clean. They loaded the captives, loaded the intelligence, lifted off as the charges detonated behind them. The mission was classified, never officially recorded, but within the special operations community word spread. Lieutenant Volkov had done something remarkable, led from planning to execution, air to ground, theory to practice. 3 more operations followed, each using her unique skill set, each successful. By the end of the deployment, Kira had established something new, a template, a proof of concept. The Navy paid attention, so did the other services. Requests came in. Could she train others? Could she develop doctrine? Could this cross-qualification be replicated? She spent 6 months stateside, working with training commands, developing programs, writing lessons learned. It was important work, but she missed the field. Missed the direct application of skill, the clarity of tactical problems. The politics of command were more ambiguous, more exhausting. Then came the situation that would define everything. A civilian ship hijacked off the coast of Somalia, pirates, hostages. The ship was American-flagged. The crew included 6 U.S. citizens. The pirates were well-armed, experienced. They'd done this before. Ransom demands were high. Time was limited. The carrier strike group responded. USS Abraham Lincoln, her old ship, the one she deployed with as a pilot, full circle. Kira was attached to the task force as a subject matter expert, special operations integration. Her job was to help plan options. The situation was complicated. The ship was anchored near the Somali coast, heavy seas, limited approach routes. The pirates had moved hostages to a secure location on the ship, strong negotiation position. A SEAL team was ready, prepared to assault, but the risk was high. Hostages could be killed in the crossfire. Pirates could scuttle the ship. Hundreds of ways it could go wrong. The planning sessions went in circles. Too many variables, too much risk. Then Kira saw something others missed. The ship's layout. She'd studied it. The hostages were in the bridge. The pirates had fortified it, but there was another access point, from above. She proposed something audacious. Aerial insertion directly onto the ship. Small team, fast rope from a helicopter, hit the bridge from an unexpected angle, overwhelm the pirates before they could react. The objections came immediately. Too risky, too exposed. The helicopter would be vulnerable. One RPG and the whole team could be lost. Kira listened to every objection, addressed each one. Timing would minimize exposure. Approach route would use the ship's superstructure as cover. Speed and surprise would offset risk. The debate went back and forth. Finally, the commander made the call. They'd try it, but with modifications. 2 teams, one from the air, one from the sea, coordinated assault, redundancy. Kira would lead the aerial element. 3 other operators. They rehearsed on a similar ship, over and over, until every movement was muscle memory, until they could execute in darkness, in chaos, in the worst conditions imaginable. The operation launched at 0300. Moonless night. Heavy seas. The helicopter came in low, wave-top level, pilots threading through a needle of darkness and weather. Kira sat in the door, watching the target ship grow larger. They had one chance. The helicopter flared, positioned over the bridge. Ropes deployed. Kira went first. Fast rope down. Feet hit the deck. She moved immediately, breached the hatch. Into the bridge, pirates reacting. Too slowly. Her team followed. 4 operators flowing into a confined space. The fight was over in seconds. 3 pirates down. 2 surrendered. Hostages secured. The C team cleared the rest of the ship. Total time from insertion to all clear, 4 minutes. No friendly casualties. All hostages safe. The mission made international news. Specifics were classified, but the outcome wasn't. American hostages rescued. Pirates captured. Ship secured. Within the special operations community, the legend grew. The pilot who became a SEAL, who could plan air operations and execute ground assaults, who brought a unique perspective that saved lives. Awards followed, official and quiet, medals pinned in classified ceremonies. But the most important recognition came from her peers, the operators she'd served with. They didn't care about her gender, didn't care about the politics. They cared that she was competent, that she could be trusted. That when things got hard, she didn't quit. Captain Garrett attended one of her lectures at the Naval Special Warfare Center, Cross-Training Integration. She saw him in the audience. After the lecture, he approached. They hadn't spoken in 2 years. "That thing I said," he began. "In training, try not to cry," she remembered. "Yeah." He met her eyes. "I was wrong about everything. You're one of the best operators I've worked with, period." It was more than an apology, it was recognition. She nodded. "We're good." And they were, because holding onto anger took energy she didn't have to spare. Kira's career continued. She took on more responsibility, led more teams, trained more operators. The pipeline she'd pioneered began producing others. Pilots with ground skills, ground forces with aviation understanding. The integration she'd proven possible became doctrine. Years passed, deployments, operations, some successful, some that taught hard lessons. She made decisions that saved lives, made decisions that cost them, learned to live with both, earned the respect of people who'd once dismissed her, not because she proved them wrong, because she'd done the work. One mission at a time, one decision at a time, one impossible choice after another. The final chapter came unexpectedly. She was offered command, Special Operations Task Force, Joint Service. The kind of position people spent entire careers working toward. She said yes. Took command with the same methodical preparation she brought to everything else. Studied her personnel, understood their capabilities, built trust. Led from the front but never so far ahead that she lost sight of her people. Under her command, the task force conducted operations across 3 continents. High-value targets, hostage rescues, intelligence gathering. The success rate was exceptional. The cost was measured in nights without sleep, decisions that haunted her, responsibility that never lightened. Command was lonely in ways training had never prepared her for, but she'd learned to carry it, one day at a time, one decision at a time. And when people asked her about the journey, about being the first woman to do what she'd done, she always gave the same answer. "I'm not the first, I'm just the first one you heard about, and I won't be the last." Because that was the truth. She hadn't broken a barrier as much as she'd walked through a door that was always open for anyone willing to pay the price. The price was high, the training was brutal, the operations were dangerous, the responsibility was crushing. But for those who made it through, who earned their place through competence and grit and refusing to quit when every rational part of their brain screamed stop, for those people, the door was always open. Kira retired after 22 years of service. 3 of those as a SEAL, the rest as a commander, trainer, leader. She left quietly, no fanfare, no press, just a ceremony with the people who mattered, her teams, her commanders, the operators she'd trained who were now training others. Hawks was there, older now, still hard, still measuring. He shook her hand. "You did good work, Volkov," she smiled. "Learned from the best, Master Chief," he nodded. "You taught some too." That was the highest praise he'd ever give, but it was enough. She left the Navy but didn't leave the community. Consulted on training programs. advised on special operations integration, wrote doctrine that would outlive her, mentored the next generation, especially the women who came after, who looked at what she'd done and thought maybe they could do it too. She told them the truth, that it would be harder than they imagined, that people would doubt them, that the training would break them down to nothing so they could build themselves into something stronger. But she also told them this: the bell is always there. You can quit anytime. No shame, no judgment. But if you choose to stay, if you choose to push through every moment when your body and mind are screaming to stop, you'll discover something about yourself. Not that you're special, not that you're chosen, but that you're capable of more than you ever imagined. That strength isn't something you're born with. It's something you build, one terrible choice at a time. Years later, at a reunion for her training class, someone asked Garrett about that first day, about the comment, "Try not to cry, sweetie." He didn't make excuses, didn't dodge. "I was an asshole," he said. "Saw what I expected to see instead of what was actually there. She proved me wrong every single day after that. Best lesson I ever learned." Kira wasn't at the reunion. She was in the mountains, training the next task force commander, showing him the terrain where she'd run those reconnaissance missions, sharing lessons that couldn't be found in manuals, passing on what she'd learned in blood and cold water and the spaces between heartbeats where you choose to continue. They stood on a ridge at sunset. The commander was young, competent, nervous about the responsibility. "Any advice?" he asked. She thought about it, about all the missions, all the decisions, all the moments that had brought her here. Remember that every person you lead is someone's daughter or son, someone's family. Their lives are in your hands. That responsibility will crush you if you let it. So don't let it. Make the best decisions you can with the information you have. Learn from the ones that go wrong. Never stop caring. And never forget that strength comes from knowing when to push and when to pull back. He nodded, looked out at the mountains. "How do you know the difference?" She smiled. "You don't, not always. That's why it's called leadership and not mathematics." They descended as darkness fell. Behind them, the mountains stood indifferent, the same mountains that had tested her, that would test him, that would test everyone who came after, unchanging, uncaring, the way nature always is to human ambition. But that was okay, because humans had something nature didn't: choice, will. The ability to look at something impossible and decide to try anyway, to fall and get up, to fail and learn, to be broken down and rebuilt stronger. That was the real lesson. Not that Kira was special, but that everyone had that capacity, hidden inside them, waiting to be forged. All it took was the choice, to not ring the bell, to take one more step, to survive one more minute, to push past the voice that said stop, to find whatever lived on the other side of impossible. And what lived there wasn't glory, wasn't fame, wasn't even respect, though that came eventually. What lived there was simpler, more profound. The knowledge that you tested yourself against the limits of your capacity and found out what you were really made of. That when everything told you to quit, you'd chosen to continue. That when people doubted you, you'd let your competence speak. That when the mission required sacrifice, you'd paid the price without hesitation. That knowledge couldn't be taken away, couldn't be diminished, couldn't be questioned. It was earned, one terrible choice at a time. Kira Volkov's story wasn't about being the first. It was about refusing to be the last, about opening a door wide enough that others could walk through, about proving that the only barriers that truly existed were the ones people chose to maintain. She'd walked into a room full of doubters and turned them into believers, not through advocacy, not through argument, through competence, through performance, through the simple act of being so undeniably good at what she did that doubt became irrelevant. And now, years later, the women who came after her didn't face the same skepticism, because she'd paid that tax, absorbed that friction, cleared that path, so they could focus on the only thing that mattered, becoming the best operators they could be. That was the legacy, not the medals, not the missions, the people, the operators she'd trained who were training others, the commanders she'd mentored who were leading now, the pilots who looked at the sky and the ground and saw not two separate worlds but one integrated battlefield, the culture she'd helped shift, one conversation and one demonstration of competence at a time, until excellence became the only metric that mattered, until being underestimated became an advantage rather than an obstacle. Until the question wasn't whether women could do the job, but simply whether this specific person, regardless of gender, had what it took. That was the victory, quiet, lasting, built on foundation of cold water and sand and decisions made in darkness when no one was watching. On the wall of the Naval Special Warfare Center, there's a plaque. It lists the names of everyone who's completed the program. Thousands of names, including Lieutenant Kira Volkov. Her name doesn't stand out, doesn't need to, it's just there, among all the others. A simple statement of fact. She did the work. She earned her place. She served with honor, nothing more, nothing less. And sometimes, late at night, when new candidates are running the beach during Hell Week, instructors tell stories. Not officially, not in briefs, just in the quiet moments between evolutions. Stories about operators who did remarkable things, who pushed past limits, who proved what was possible. And sometimes those stories mention a pilot who became a SEAL, who led from the front, who never quit. The stories don't dwell on her gender. Don't make it the point, because it isn't the point. The point is the work, the mission, the team, the choices made in the spaces between heartbeats when everything hangs in balance and the next decision determines whether people live or die. That's where reputations are built, not in ceremony, not in recognition, in the doing, in the executing, in the constant pressure of operational reality where competence is the only currency that matters. And by that measure, Kira Volkov was wealthy beyond calculation, not because she was the first, but because when tested, when pushed, when confronted with the choice to continue or quit, she chose to continue, every single time. And that choice, repeated across years and missions and moments of doubt, built something that couldn't be taken away, couldn't be diminished. A legacy measured not in awards, but in the people she'd trained, the missions she'd led, the standards she'd set. Simple, profound, lasting.